Alright, page 2 of your midterm review. So the first thing that we are at is F, and it says to graph y is less than x plus 4 and y is greater than or equal to x minus 2, and this is a set. So remember, when it's a set, it means what they have in common, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is going to draw my x and y axes. Remember, that's your x and this is your y. I'm going to label them. And then on the first one, I'm going to do a t-chart. And remember, when you're doing your t-chart, you're doing the boundary. So you're really doing the y equals x plus 4, right? So when you do your t-chart, your xy chart, the first thing you want to do is you want to plug in numbers. So I always start with 0. So when x is 0, what is y? I can't hear you. 4. And since it's only you and me, that means that you have to tell me the answers, because there's nobody else that can tell me them. So just you. So now we have 1, and when x is 1, y is 5. And now we're gonna plot those points. So we have 0, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so I have a point there, and then 1, 5. So I'm going to go over 1, so I'm going to label that a 1, and then up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and one more 5. And now, is this line dotted or solid? Yeah, you're right, it is dotted, because there's no equals to, so it's dotted. Now, how do I determine if it's shaded above or below that line? Which way is it shaded? Which side of the line is it shaded? Did you say pick a point? Alright, so what point should I pick? Well, what point do I usually pick? 0, 0. You're right. 0, 0. So I'm going to pick 0, 0, and I'm going to plug it in here. So I have 0 is less than 0 plus 4. Remember, you can pick any point that's not on the line. And since 0, 0 is not there, that's why we picked it. So 0 is less than 4. So is 0 less than 4? Is that true or false? That's true. So that means that I'm going to shade. You always shade the true, so that means I'm going to shade on this side. But I'm just going to put little arrows up here so that I know which way I'm going to shade. And then if I have to, I can always erase or cross out later. But I'm just going to put little arrows. Now I'm going to do this one. This y is your greater than or equal to x minus 2. Over here, I'm going to do the boundary. Remember, y equals x minus 2 is our boundary, so I'm going to do an xy chart over here. So when x is 0, y is negative 2. And when x is 1, y is negative 1. So we're going to plot those points. I have 0, negative 2, 0, negative 2. I have a point there. And then at 1, I'm going to go 1, negative 1. So I have a point here. Is this line dotted or solid? It's solid. How do you know? Right, because of that underneath there. So it's because it's equal to right there, so it's solid. So I'm going to draw a solid line. And now I have to find out if I'm going to shade which way of this line. So I'm going to go and pick a point again. And what point is not on the line? Again, 0, 0 is not on the line. So you could pick any point, remember, but I'm going to always pick 0, 0 because I feel it's easiest. So we have 0 is less than or equal to 0 minus 2. So I have 0 is greater than or equal to a negative 2. Is that true? 0 is greater than or equal to a negative 2. Yes, it's true. So that means I'm shading this way. So that they have in common right here, right? So this is where we shade between the two graphs. Alright, G. G is another one that I would make sure you pay close attention to by Tuesday, or the next time you have my class, for that written portion. So it says, if it costs $250 to make 100 baskets and $500 to make 300 baskets, assuming the relationship is linear, how much would it cost to make 1,000 baskets? Well, since it's asking for your cost, and that's what they want you to find, that means that that is going to be your y value, all right? Because that's what they want you to solve for. That's your y. So you're solving for your y value. So that means your basket is going to be your x value. So now we can go back and we can get points. We can get 2 points so you can find the equation of a line. So it says here it costs $250. So what is that? Is that my x or my y? That's my y. For 100 baskets. That's my x. So that means remember, a point is x comma y. So we have 100 baskets costing $250 for our first point. So take a second and do your second point. What's your second point? So you have 500. Is that my x or my y? $500. My y. And then 300 baskets is your x. So you have 300 and 500. So now we have 2 points. How can I get an equation if I have 2 points? What do I have to find first? My slope. So remember, your slope is your always subtracting your y's over your x's, right? So I have 500 minus my 250 over x, so 300 minus my 100. So I have 250, so that equals 250 over 200. I'm going to reduce, so I cross those zeros out. And how can I reduce your 25 and 20? And we get 5 over 4. Putting 5 into both of them. So now I just have to write my equation. Remember that equation? It says y minus your y1, so your y1, so you have, and it's opposite, so it's 250, is equal to your slope. So you have here, your slope was your 5/4, and then your x minus your x1, which is 100. So if you need that formula again, we did it on page 1, but if you need it again, it was y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1 is what the equation is that we're using on this. So now it says, remember, this is our equation. So it says, well, what's the cost for 1,000 baskets? And remember, baskets was our x, so we're going to put this in for our x value right there, and we're going to solve it out. So that means y equals, and this is going to be brought to the other side, so we're going to add that, y equals 5 divided by 4 times 1,000 minus 100 plus 250. So let's put that into our calculator and find out what we get. So I'm going to clear this out. Can you see that? So we get 5 divided by 4 times 1,000 minus 100 we know is 900. So I'm just going to put 900 there so we don't have to put all that into our calculator. Plus 250. Our answer then is $1,375 is what it would cost. Now some of you might say, well, why can't I just use ratio, or why can't I just do it a different way? Well, the reason why is because remember B is considered like when you do the y equals mx plus b. B is going to be like the initial cost or setup fee and stuff like that. That's why ratios don't work. So you want to make sure, because it says a linear relationship, you want to make sure you find the equation of a line and do it out that way. Alright, the next part says to graph these equations. So I'm going to fold this under real quick so I can see all of the next set. Alright. Also, when it says to draw a rough sketch of each, and so basically on your exam or on your 8.5 by 11 sheet that you're going to be making while you're doing this review, you might want to just kind of sketch them so you can see what they are. Also, make sure you know the domain and range of each one of these. Your domain, do you remember what your domain is? Your domain is your x. What can x be? And your range is what can y be? Now, if you think about it, domain in the alphabet would come before range alphabetically. X comes before y, so x would come before y. So your domain is with your x, your range is with your y. And it's basically what could your values be. What values could you plug in to your x, and what values could you get out of your y? What could your answers be? So after when you're looking at these ones, like you can see that you could put anything in for your x, right? Because the only time you can't put something into the x is when it's on the bottom, like this one, like these two and these ones. X, your bottom could never be 0. Remember, because you can't divide by 0. So that's when you have to worry about your domain. So that's why these ones, when we get to them, will have like it'll be non-zero, because you can't divide by 0. All right. So what does the graph y equals 2x squared look like? Well, if you don't know, you either have to put it in your graphing calculator or put it on your 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. But what it is that is a parabola, and your parabola would have a domain, what your x could be. So what values of x could, if I wanted to plug in and make a t-chart, remember you can always make a t-chart also to see what they are, but if you make a t-chart, make sure you do like +1, 0, and -1, so that you can see where it's going. And you might have to do more points depending upon which kind of graph you're doing, but that will kind of help you out too. So we have here your domain. You could put anything in this t-chart. That's what it's asking you. What could you put in the t-chart for your x's? So you could put anything. So your domain is all real. So I'm going to be using just that for short notation. But remember that this symbol, when you have 2 lines, and that means real. Alright? So then your range, which is just a little r, or a big R, it's capital R, but there's only one. See how this has 2 lines, that has just 1? So your range, what is my y values? Well, my y values are positive. So then it's positive real. Remember that your domain is your x and your range is your y. Alright. So what does, if you have a -2, what does that do to the graph? That means it opens down. So on this graph you would have a domain, so your x value still could be all real numbers, and your range is negative real. Then you have y equals 2x squared. Well, if you have a graphing calculator, you would throw that into your calculator. And again, remember, when you throw it into your calculator, just in case you don't remember or you don't remember how to use this calculator, you go y, and I have to clear that out, so you have y equals 2 divided by x and then square. And that's the y equals. So then you just hit graph. If for some reason your graph does not work, if it says anything, remember you always want to try zoom 6, which is standard. So then it graphs. So that's what our graph looks like. So I know that we have here is what my graph looks like. Alright. If you do not have a graphing calculator, what you'll want to do is you'll want to put in numbers. So if I put in 1 for my x, I would have 1, and then 1 squared is 1, so 2 divided by 1 would be my 2, so I would have a point right here. And then I'd have to get another point, which I would have, if I go, if I went 2, I have 2 squared, so we have 2 squared, so then I would go 2 and divided by 2 squared. So then I'd have your half, so then you'd have at 2, you'd have your 0.5, so it would be like this, and hopefully then you'd remember that it goes down. But then you'd have to do the negative, and so when you do negative 1, you'd have negative 1 squared, which makes it a positive again, so then you'd have your 2 again, and then you'd have your 0.5 when you do your negative 2. So that's the other way you can always do all of these, is by doing your points, your XY chart. Alright, so again, what is my domain? What can I put in for my x? Everything except for 0. So we would say all real numbers except 0, or you would say that it is your non-zero real. And my range is also, because you see how my range is my range is non-zero because it's not going to give me 0, but it's also going to be positive. So we have positive non-zero real. Alright, now let's look at the next one. I want you to take a moment and put -2, so put your y equals, and put into your graphing calculator this one right here. Alright, so we have a -2 divided by my x squared. So x squared. Oops, delete that. Graph. So it's this way. So that means your domain, remember, is what can your x be? And can it be 0? No. So that means it's non-zero. So that means not 0. Non-zero reals. And what could the range be? Your range, what is your y values? Do I have anything up here? No. So that means my y values are negative, but I never get y equals 0. So that means it's non-zero negative reals. Alright. And just so you know why my screen goes blank is because if I don't touch the screen like this, it kind of goes blank, so I have to remember to do that. So y equals, we're going to put that back into our calculator, 2 divided by x. And again, if you don't have a graphing calculator, especially on the midterm, I would just be jotting these down on your 8.5 by 11. And you can include your domain and range there on your 8.5 by 11. So we have here this graph then. We're going to put it here. So it's here and here. And again, you can hopefully tell that neither one, your x nor your y, are going to be your zeros. But see how x can't be 0? But other than that, x can be anything. So that means your domain is non-zero reals. And my range is also, because there's some up here for my y's and some down here for my y's. So that's also non-zero reals. So I'm going to put in the calculator now, and I'm going to insert that negative. So you go second, insert, and then I'm just going to insert a negative because now I have negative 2 divided by x, and then graph. Now it's in my second and fourth quadrant. And I'm going to move this so I can write. So now it's in my second and fourth quadrant, and so my domain of this is what can you put in for your x. You can put anything in for your x except for 0, so non-zero reals. And your range is what values of your y values. And remember, you have y here and you have y down here, so that means everything except for 0. So non-zero reals. And now going to G, I'm going to go y equals. And you might already know what this is. Do you know what kind of graph that is? Hopefully you guys all said a line. Yes, a straight line, and it's like this. So now we have, what is our domain? What can I put in for x? I can put anything in for x. So my domain is all real, and my range is, what's my y values? What answers am I going to get out? All real. And the last one, hopefully you guys know what kind of graph this also is, but if not, you put it into your calculator and then you hit graph, and again, it's a line. Whoops, and it's supposed to go through the origin. Kind of hit that one off to the side, right? No, that goes to the origin, hopefully, right? We'll just make it a thicker line. Alright, because we know it passes through the origin. Alright, so, and it goes on forever for infinity. So now the domain of this one, what can you put in for your x, is real, and range is also all real. Alright, and now I'm going to flip it over so we can have our last one, our last part of this page. Now, when it says give a formula which might model the following. So okay, so now the first thing, remember, you're doing is you're looking at both of these graphs and you're choosing one of these. Alright, so remember that this is in my y spot, so that means it's going to be L equals something, right? That's what it tells you. So L equals something. And see how all of these ones are L equals? But if they weren't, then you could cross them out. So you want to make sure that first. So L equals, alright? Then you remember that these are direct or inverses, so you always want to always have that K, that constant K that we don't know about. That's where that K comes from. Then we look at M, and we just did a whole bunch of these, so what did M look like? Hopefully you can say M looks like a, correct, a line. So now the m looks like a line. Is m squared or is it not squared? And right up here we can look at it. I can pull it down a little bit. See how this looks like this one? So that's not squared. So it's just plain old m. Right? Now we want to add to it, we're going to add this graph to this, right? So because that's what we're doing, is we're adding this to it. So now this graph talks about, and you always look down here, this is P. So now P is, what kind of graph is this? This is called a parabola. So now that's a parabola, so P is squared. And since it's direct, also this is direct, so P is squared, it's on the top, P squared, right? So that means this one, that's what both of these graphs look like. So we're looking for something like this. Now remember that this is our answer, it's B, right? Now remember that it could have been, if you needed it to, these two could be reversed because it's commutative. So you can always switch these two around. Commutative means it's a community, they dance around. So that's actually what it could be. So that's 6. Now I'm actually going to do an extra problem that isn't on this worksheet, but if you want you can stay with me and do it with me, and if you don't, you can go to the next page, but I will tell you it is beneficial. So I'm going to flip it over and do that right here. So if I gave you a graph, and I'm going to just give you 2 graphs. If I gave you a graph and we had here, I'm going to call this up here a T, and then I'm going to call this an A, and I'm going to have this one go down like this, right? And then I'm also going to have this one, and I'm going to call this a T, and then this a C down here. And this one's going to be like this, alright? So the first thing I want to do is I want to, and what we're doing is the same thing, as we're looking at these 2 graphs, and we're going to write an equation for both of graphs put together. What could model this, right? So the first thing I want to do is I want to go look to see what is on my left hand side, and hopefully you can say that T equals, and we know it's always going to have K on the top because that's where K belongs, that's where the constant belongs. So now this first one is an inverse, right, because it goes down. So this is an inverse. So because it's an inverse, we know inverse means divided by, so that means that this is going to be on the bottom. So it's going to have an A on the bottom. Now the thing we don't know is if it was A or A squared. So it actually could be A, or it could be T equals K over A squared. Now without more information, either one of these is correct. So actually you have this or that. So this is actually, both of them are our equations so far. Now it says C, and we have here is a parabola, and we have we know that a normal parabola is y equals x squared, so that means that C is going to be squared, and we know that it's direct, so it's going to be on the top. So we're going to add C squared to our equation. But remember, it could be this one, so I'm going to add C squared to this one. So that means that it's one or the other. So when it's multiple choice, you want to look for it. You're not going to have to choose between this or that. You just have to make sure you know it could be either one. And so then you would look for your final answer. Alright? Well, that's page 2, so now we can go to page 3 in a little while.